Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us to celebrate the life of my mother, Anne Johansen, an independent living advocate who died in her own home on Independence Day this year. The intro slide you just showed, or I just showed, is her Mary Englebright desk calendar from the actual day of her death. So the quote from Khalil Gibran was really appropriate. Life without liberty is like a body without a spirit. Much of Anne's life was a struggle for freedom, and I look forward to sharing her story with everyone here today. So I'm Anne's daughter, Elizabeth Johansen, and I have designed this event. And I want to extend thanks to the Boston Center for Independent Living for taking on the technical aspects of the event, including Bill Henning, who might jump in at time to help with glitches. So Bill's just going to say a brief hello right now so you know who he is.
Hi, thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for letting BCIL, as we're known as, Boston Center for Independent Living, participate. Just a couple technical things. I think if you're not speaking, please mute. That will help with the audio. If you need closed captions, you can click on the closed captions button. So I'm sure it'll be a very touching tribute.
Awesome. So today I've invited a number of my mother's close friends and family and colleagues to share something around 1 minute of a memory or a prayer from any religion or a reading or a poem or a song or even a joke. I don't know if anyone will share a joke, but we'll see. We're going to record, and we are recording already, the event in hopes of sharing it out today for people who might not have been able to attend. And anyone who had a phone call with my mother in recent years will remember that technology was not always her best friend. And her typical greeting to me was, hold on a minute, wait a minute, damn it, okay, dear. And so please don't worry if there's any technical difficulties today, because they'll surely honor her memory. Also, I plan to edit the video after the event, so if there's parts that you just don't want to share beyond today, you can contact me and I can get those out of there. So after our planned speakers speak, we'll stop the recording, but I'll stay online, and if anyone wants to share anything else or chat or something, we can do that. And also, if you're not, even if you're not like a planned speaker, you can feel free to write memories or thoughts or wishes in the chat, and that will also be saved. So even if I don't see it right at this moment, I can read through them after. So that'll be really cool. So this is sort of the idea for today. So I'm hoping to tell a bit of the story of her life and interject with people from those different times. So I'll do a little greeting, and we'll talk a little bit about childhood memories, provide some love for her adopted daughter, Wendy and Halm, talk about life in Colorado, 7 years in Massachusetts nursing homes, and then how she achieved some freedom in her mind and then also in the community. We'll talk a bit about her disability activism, and then some of saving the best years for last, and then we'll end with a photo slideshow with some music of some of the photos over the years. Okay, so first I'm going to read this greeting. This is a greeting that my mother actually had on her wall next to her desk where she'd sit during the day in her Hanover apartment. This is from the Onondaga Historical Association, a greeting from the Haudenosaunee, or also known as Iroquois people. Here it is. Greetings and thanks to each other as people. To the earth, mother of all, greetings and thanks. To all the waters, waterfalls and rain, rivers and oceans, greetings and thanks. To all the fish life, greetings and thanks. The grains and greens, beans and berries, as one, we send thanks to food plants. Medicine herbs of the world and their keepers, greetings and thanks. To all animals and their teachings, greetings and thanks. To trees for shelter and shade, fruit and beauty, greetings and thanks. To all birds, large and small, joyful greetings and thanks. And from the four directions, the four winds, thank you for purifying the air we breathe and giving us strength, greetings. The thunderers, our grandfathers in the sky, we hear your voices. greetings and thanks. And now the sun, for the light of a new day and all the fires of life, greetings and thanks. To our oldest grandmother, the moon, leader of women all over the world, and the stars, for their mystery, beauty, and guidance, greetings and thanks. And to our teachers from all times, reminding us of how to live our greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation, for all the love around us, greetings and thanks. And for that which is forgotten, we remember, we end our words, now our minds are one. Okay, so just to start talking a little bit about my mom, as many of you know here, she had many challenges in her life. And this is a bit of a kind of before we start talking about her story, there are some tough parts of it. So, you know, for her life, she endured physical and emotional abuse. She lived during times of eugenic sentiment. She experienced parental shame. She experienced unconsented experimental medical procedures as a child. She was subject to sexual assault. She was part of forced adoption, coerced abortion, sexism, racism as a white person who looked to many people like a person of color, and ableism, of course, in reaction to her degenerative neuromuscular disease called Charcot Marie Tooth. She struggled with depression and suicide throughout much of her life, and so some of these topics will come up today. So if anyone needs to take a break, please do so, or opt out of different parts of it. But today, just know that we're ultimately celebrating a person who died completely unexpectedly in her own home, while still looking forward to what was ahead. She didn't leave any note, which was really exciting. And she and I didn't really discuss her desires for a memorial service other than maybe having a viewing of her favorite movie, The Big Lebowski. So all of you, that's your assignment for tonight. But we thought she would probably still live for another decade or more. And one thing she always emphasized to me was that she wanted to share her life so people could learn from her mistakes, as she called them. For me, I don't really see mistakes so much as, the inspiration that she was to me and those around her. So I'm really looking forward to sharing her life today with her friends and family and colleagues. And, I think what's really cool is that despite all odds, she ultimately achieved equanimity. She found happiness. And to me, she told me that she immensely enjoyed the last decade of her life, that they were really the best years that she had ever experienced. And that's thanks to many of the people who are here today. So kind of going back to the beginning, my mother, Anne, was born to Mavis Lois Beatrice Hetherington and Frank Niles Halm in Washington, D.C. Colonel Frank N. Halm, my grandpa, was in the Air Force, and Mavis was a war bride that he met in England from the time he was stationed there in World War II. My uncle Larry Halm was born several years later, and they lived in Germany, Virginia, and then eventually Lowry Air Force Base in Colorado. And at that time, they ended up divorcing. The kids continued to live with my grandmother and visit my grandfather and his new wife, Dottie Josephine, in Oregon. Mavis ultimately remarried another person, Reet Hussey, and brought several step siblings into the mix. Mavis also had a child with Reet when my mother was a teenager, who's my aunt Carolyn Hussey Howell. Um, my mother told me in general that her home life was very difficult, and around 1955 was when my mother was about 4 years old. She and my uncle and my grandmother were all diagnosed at that time with the degenerative neuromuscular disease that I mentioned, Charcot Marie Tooth. And my mother just had, at the time, a slightly different gait than other kids her age, and she used braces to correct her foot drop. But in the wake of a lot of societal eugenics attitudes, her parents felt a lot of shame at their children's imperfect genes and how it reflected poorly on them as people. And uh, in that case, also every summer from ages 6 to 11, she had these experimental surgeries at military hospitals in hopes of providing better leg function to them. This was before the time that children were also involved in some of the consent for the medical procedures that they might engage in, and it left her with casts on both legs all summer, every year when she was in elementary school. And they didn't even provide her a wheelchair to get around with. So she'd kind of drag herself around and wore like holes in the heels of her casts. When her mother remarried her father, her stepfather was physically abusive towards the kids, and my mother in general was made to feel like a stupid person and kind of like a mistake overall. And so that's kind of a lot, at least what she had told me of, what a lot of her childhood felt like. But we have someone here who was also there, my uncle Larry Halm, and I was going to invite him to share anything that he might want to share, any words he'd want to share today. So, Uncle
I
Larry.
wish I had something to add. Wow. Yeah, her experience with Charcot Marie Tooth started earlier than mine. It was much more severe than mine, really for a long, long time. So CMT, besides you being my sister, CMT was a big part of our lives. Was part of our connection. We kind of took different approaches to how we were going to approach that, deal with it. I tried to outrun it, and she wanted a family of her own. And that was a huge, huge focus of her life. And she ultimately achieved that goal in amazing fashion, so far as I can tell. She left an incredible legacy. She never got an opportunity to be formally educated, but she was incredibly well self-educated, well-read, had a passion for learning and reaching out and connecting. She was an incredible fan of humanity in general. A few exceptions, no doubt. I just think she always gave her best effort in what life had dealt her, and that given the situation that she lived with as much grace as any human could. She was an inspiration to me. I guess that's it. I think as the uncle, I'm allowed to butt in later if I feel like it, but I'm not sure. I'll have to check the rules.
That sounds good. Oh, that was lovely. Thank you. So something that happened kind of later in her childhood when she was in high school, I was going to share with you here. When she was about 16 years old, during her junior year of high school in 67 to 68, she became pregnant. And this was in the years before Roe versus Wade provided the right to and the access to safe and legal abortion. However, while my mother vehemently believed in abortion access, she never said that she would have chosen abortion in this case. During her pregnancy, her family wouldn't allow her to live with them due to the shame, which was a pretty common thing for many families at the time. So they moved her into the Booth Home for Unwed Mothers in Denver, Colorado. In April or May of 1968, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl she named Wendy Anne Halm. And despite loving her baby immensely, she gave her up for adoption very shortly after birth due to pressure from her family and from society. This was during a period of time in the US where there were over 1.5 million women who lost their children to forced adoptions. You can learn more about this in a documentary called A Girl Like Her by Anne Fessler. My mom's not, part of that documentary, but it talks about that sort of era in history and like how this happened. So learning about history is a great way, to hopefully not repeat that in the future. So not only was my mother having a child out of wedlock, but people didn't believe she was equipped to raise children because of her disability. So for her entire life, my mother always kept Wendy really close in her heart, and she's been searching for her ever since. And I'm going to continue to search for her in chance that we can reunite and I can share some of the love that my mother had for her. But in honor of Wendy Ann Halm, I'm going to play a song from one of my mother's favorite musicals called Into the Woods. This was something we actually had the pleasure of seeing again just recently this spring. So the musical is actually a mashup of different fairy tales that explore the up and downs of life. And one part of the song I'll share says, fathers, mothers, people make mistakes. Honor their mistakes, fight for their mistakes. Everybody makes one another's terrible mistakes. My mother always viewed giving up Wendy as one of her great life mistakes. This final line of the song is, someone is on your side, no one is alone. And I know that's something that my mother would have really wanted Wendy to know and feel. So the song is No One Is Alone by Stephen Sondheim.
Mother cannot guide you. Now you're on your own. Only me beside you. Still you're not alone. No one is alone. Truly, no one is alone. I wish. I know.
Things, right things.
Who knows what she'd say?
Who can say what's true?
Nothing's quite so clear now.
Do things, fight things.
Feel you've lost your way.
You decide, but you are not alone.
Believe me, no one is alone.
No one is alone, believe me.
Truly,
people make mistakes. Fathers,
mothers,
people make mistakes. Holding to their own, thinking they're alone.
Honor their mistakes.
Fight for their mistakes.
Everybody makes
one another's terrible mistakes. Witches can be right, giants can be good. You decide what's right, you decide what's good.
Just remember.
Just remember. Someone is on your side, our side, someone else is not. While we're seeing our side, maybe we forgot. They are not alone, no one is alone. Someone is on your side. No one is alone.
So after giving birth to Wendy, my mother went back to school. And in the spring of her senior year of high school, my mother met my father, Benjamin Bruce Johansen. She quickly became pregnant again. This time, my grandmother, Mavis, pressured her to have an abortion. And so, kind of against her will, she terminated the pregnancy, which was also a great sadness to her. Even though she was no longer pregnant, her parents pressured her also to get married to my father, and they were married in September 1969. She worked as a medical assistant at various places throughout the 1970s, and then eventually I was born in 1979, about 10 years after they were married. People always wondered how a disabled person could be a parent, and my mother was an innovator who always was finding new ways to adapt to the environment around her, which was not designed for her. She would frequently repurpose common items to enable her to be an awesome parent. So I captured one really hilarious story of her parenting that she recounts on video. So just a backstory, when I was 7 years old, I hurt my foot and I needed stitches, but I was unwilling to walk to the car and she was unable to carry me. So a brilliant idea struck that she would bring out the old stroller that we hadn't used in several years. and some antics ensued. So we'll share this now.
Mother's going to tell all the story of the time she let me go in the stroller.
With help and comments by Elizabeth, no doubt. Let's see, I think you'd hurt yourself. I think you'd hurt
I think I did. I had like an ouchie in my ankle or like something like that.
Yeah, I think we put the new screen door on, the family room door.
Oh, and it like gored me or something.
Yeah, it swung back and got you. So we were going to the doctor. So I got out the stroller. You were like, way older than using a stroller.
Was I like 7 or something? Yeah.
And so I put you in the stroller, because I couldn't carry you. And so we get outside the front door, and I need to lock the door. So I let you go at the top of the ramp.
You might have been out of practice with the whole stroller mechanic.
I guess
at that junction.
By then. And you plowed into the barrel of
barrels!
Flowers. Yeah, barrel of flowers.
And did I scream?
Yes, actually, there was screaming.
That's lovely. Thank you very much for relating this story.
You're welcome.
Oh man. So yeah, you get a feel for what things were like. We were always taking things with a pretty good sense of humor. But with this example and countless others, she provided me with a real example of a female innovator when our society often highlights male role models who do that. And she really taught me the mindsets of an engineer, like flexibility, creativity, and designing your environment and your reality. One of her refrigerator magnets says, "This is your world, shape it, or someone else will." So largely due to her example, I feel confident pursuing an engineering career, and I've been designing accessible medical technology for many years now. So kind of going back to the storyline, my parents ultimately separated in 1989. My mother always had love for my father. She couldn't really bear the emotional toll of being in touch with him after the divorce very much, but they definitely saw each other at various school events or birthday parties or my wedding, but otherwise they weren't really in touch these past years. But even so, I know that she would love for my dad to say a few words, and he offered, and so I'm going to invite him to say something right now.
Good afternoon. Anne and I met early in our lives, and in spite of the challenges she had, as Elizabeth described, what struck me most about her was from the beginning, she was a kind and gentle soul. She loved to travel and to see new places. But I think one of her biggest accomplishments, I think she would say, is that in spite of, she basically swam upriver to opinions as to what she should do, whether she should be a mother or not. In spite of those things, she had Elizabeth, and she was an exemplary mom. And her great job as a mom is evidenced by, in part, the kind of person Elizabeth is today as a successful wife, mom, and medical research professional. I know that she was proud of Elizabeth, as am I. And I wish, given the life that she lived and the hand that she was dealt in that life, I wish she rests in peace. Thanks.
Thank you. So even back starting in those days, she was also an advocate for people with disabilities and for improved accessibility. She got her first wheelchair van around when I was 9 or 10, something like that. The van was equipped with hand controls to enable her to drive me to all my activities like gymnastics, piano lessons, Girl Scouts, and more. However, this was just before or around the time of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and accessibility was not a requirement for most public or private buildings, including schools. So this meant there was no space for her to park the wheelchair van when she would come to the school building, because you need a space that has enough room on one side to let the lift out and let you get out with your wheelchair. So at the time, I remember she asked my elementary school principal to mark a special parking spot that would be closer to the door. But they initially suggested that she could park in the back of the school near the dumpsters, which had an incredibly long trek to the door over a long sidewalk that also would, in the winter, have tons of snow on it. That would also be like the sidewalk that everyone forgot to remove the snow from. So she continued to advocate for the spot near the front door, and that was something that she did to improve accessibility for us, but also for others who come after. Um, after my parents, my mother and I moved to a one-bedroom condo in Littleton, Colorado, and she always stocked it with my favorite fruits. We picked out a rainbow couch for the living room, and even during my 6th grade, she volunteered to coach our Odyssey of the Mind team, which was about 6 kids. And she started by attending the inaccessible coaches meeting at our public school, where she had to hover at the top of a staircase and try and hear like what the rules were as they presented them to the rest of the coaches who could actually be in the room. Nevertheless, she made just a really lovely environment for all of us to be creative and crazy, and she fed us and everything else while we worked on our 8-minute creative skit. And she just, made a really loving environment for my creativity and for others. Um, During my childhood, we also started doing holidays together with our dear friends, the Wolflick family. In addition to my grandmother and my aunt and uncle, we met the Wolflicks first when their daughter Audrey and I were in the same preschool together. And they're so close to us that they really became like family. So both Audrey and her dad, Rob, are going to share some words today. So I'm going to introduce them now.
I'm just going to cry through this whole thing. So everybody forgive me. Elizabeth is my oldest friend. We met in preschool. I've known them for 40 years, and Anne taught me manners. And I will always be thankful for that. I can remember when we were really young and Ben and Anne were married, and we always had birthday parties together every year. Well into high school, we always shared Christmases together, and Anne was a big advocate of please and thank you, and she was the one, probably besides my parents, who taught me manners and taught my brother and I manners. I always be appreciative of that, and I loved her wit and her very dark sense of humor. And she always made us laugh. And every Christmas we'd crack these poppers, and I think they were from England, if I'm remembering correctly. And I don't know if anybody knows or can picture this, but they're a Christmas decoration, and it's kind of like a tube, and at the end it has crackers, and you pull it, and inside is a little toy, a little game. There's like a little saying. There's always these paper crowns, these ridiculous paper crowns. I'm sure there's pictures. I have a feeling there's pictures of us in them. And every single year, for probably about 20 years, we had Christmases together and had these poppers. And Anne had very unmanageable curly hair. And every single year, she would always just say how unmanageable this crown was on her, fluffy curly hair. I'm just so thankful that our parents met 40 years ago, because I have lifelong friends. So I'm going to miss Anne very much.
I'll try to get through this too. We'll all miss Anne terribly here, but I guess for me, one of the big things about Anne was the sense of love and joy and smiles and laughter. That's what I remember about Anne and all of our time together, and the holidays we spent together. A lot of love and a lot of laughter. That was a big thing that I remember here, and that'll drive me forward here in my life as I think about her, how I have a smile on my face and a little laughter going on here, even though right now it's pretty sad for all of us. So I guess my hope and prayer is that God will comfort us all here during this time, because she's a goal in all of our lives, that's for sure. So take it away to the next person.
Thank you guys. Um, so you can probably all get a sense of kind of what she is like from so many different viewpoints. You know, for me, my mother was always really loving and supportive of me. She always advocated for my needs. She even helped me find special educational programs that would provide a challenge for me. And as an only child, she even made efforts to set up play dates with like probably thousands of play dates with different dear friends who I even have today. And Audrey's probably like the very beginning of that history. Um, during my teenage years, things didn't always go super great. And luckily, she made some friends during that time who could support her. So one of those friends is Joanne Zimmer, and um, they ended up also kind of getting together and working, and eventually she became a member of the Catholic Church during that time. And so I would love to invite Joanne to share some words right now.
Sorry, I was muted.
Good.
Yeah, and just hearing all the stories that we've heard so far, Anne was such an exceptional woman, and I loved her, and we had a wonderful time together. We shared when Anne moved from Denver to Boston, we began weekly chats, which we shared whatever we read, events that we were living, and everything and anything else. And I wanted to mention Ellie, a friend of mine from Boston, whom I introduced to Anne at a luncheon. And Ellie helped open the door for the possibility of independent living. Ellie had a lot of contacts, and through that, Anne found her way out of the nursing home, which she was not partial to. And Ellie would say to me, I only made suggestions. It was Anne who pursued the possibilities and found her own way. And she's very emphatic about that. And I know how much she enjoyed moving to Hanover, where she could be close to you, Elizabeth, and to Caleb and the children. Though she was very happy, and all the adventures that the five of you went on, she was delighted in those. And I would like to read a prayer that she had in her home. It's the prayer of St. Francis. It expresses so well and the Anne I loved. I have to read it, sorry. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying that we are born again to eternal life. Sorry, I almost got through it. But I will always, my experience, my knowing of your mom very, very much. I loved her. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. She also made another dear friend around this time, Kendra Gray. Kendra has shared some memories I'll read to you now. I met Anne at our mailboxes in 1995 as I was recovering from a second spine surgery. We became fast friends. Our main dates were rolling and strolling several blocks and across a 6-lane main road to enjoy Asian food and a $2 movie theater. Even though we both left Colorado, we remained dear friends, sharing lots of love in cards and a few visits I was able to make to Massachusetts. I love and miss her so very much. around 1997, I left Colorado to study engineering at Harvey Mudd College, and then later moved to Boston for a job after graduation. And after about, I remember mom was volunteering or getting engaged somewhat with a place called the Conflict Center, which is a center focused on peace on earth and like peaceful ways of making change. During that time, I think she also works with our friend Anne Lederer and to engage a variety of immigrants from the Soviet Union in a program they designed together, which was around teaching English as a second language over the phone. So I'm going to invite Anne Lederer to share some words right now.
Thank you. I'm crying. This has been beautiful, Elizabeth, so far. So Elizabeth and my daughter Michaela became good friends at George Washington High School in Denver in 1995. So not 40 years ago, but almost 30. And through Elizabeth, Anne and I became friends, sharing many interests in being mothers of teenage daughters who are now grown with children of their own, which is pretty beautiful. We had a rich friendship, and I have much admiration and respect for Anne, as so many of you do, as well as having shared joy and laughter and support with her. I'll miss her chuckle, her sharp wit, her keen perceptions. She was extraordinary in her approach to her life and conditions, and with unique determination, positivity that people have talked about, and creativity. Elizabeth just shared a little bit about ESL TEL, English as a second language, which we developed so that people with disabilities who couldn't leave their home could still be quite wonderful English teachers with English learners from the former Soviet Union who weren't so keen on leaving their home either. So Anne taught English through weekly conversations, telephone conversations with 6 or so different women. And Natalia, I thought, was going to be on this call, but I don't see her. But in the slideshow that Elizabeth has at the end, there are photos of Anne meeting the students for almost in person for almost the first time after having worked with them for about 8 or 9 months on the telephone. So last thing I just wanted to say is how absolutely wonderful Elizabeth and Caleb have been there for Anne in all the ways they could possibly be, and having been advocates for her in so many ways. I miss her here in Denver, but was thrilled that Anne could live so close to Claire and Malcolm, Caleb, and Elizabeth. Thank you. I miss her too.
Oh, thank you. So around the time that I moved to Boston, I asked if my mother would want to move out to Boston to be closer to me, but there were a lot of barriers. So this was before the Affordable Care Act, and she had private insurance through an insurance carrier, Kaiser, in Colorado, and it was still legal for companies to deny health insurance to people who had pre-existing conditions. So as far as we knew, because she owned part of the condo that she had, and she wouldn't qualify for Medicaid necessarily. And so literally, even just because of the health insurance alone, we couldn't figure out how she could potentially move to a different place. But finally, around 2005, she said, like, okay, let's do it. And the only thing we could think of is for her to spend down all her assets and come to a nursing home. And so she said, okay, let's start doing that. Let's start looking at different nursing homes and such. But suddenly everything happened a lot faster than we planned. So a couple days after my partner Caleb and I closed on our first home, which was like a 2-family fixer-upper that we were going to rush to fix and rent out, my mother found out that she could no longer stand up and transfer from her bed to her wheelchair. And with limited income, we didn't know of services that she could use to afford like long-term in-home help, either in Colorado or Massachusetts. We just didn't know about anything. So I immediately traveled to Colorado. We packed everything in her condo in 1 week. She slept in her wheelchair every single night because we didn't have a means to transfer her. And then our family friends, the Wolflicks, helped to sell her remaining possessions in her condo after we left. And we called nursing homes and we're just like, who has an open bed? And the place with an open bed, it was a place called Vernon Hall, which was one of the lowest rated nursing homes in Massachusetts. So we flew together on the airline and we just kind of showed up and we're like, we don't know how to get her into the airline seat. And just kind of were like, hopefully wonderful people will step forward and just medically lift her and like get her back and forth so we can get over there. So people showed up and we made it. And but this was the beginning of 7 really horrific years of living in 4 different nursing homes. So after several years at Vernon Hall, she moved to the state's top-rated nursing home, the Boston home. This home was specifically designed for younger people using wheelchairs. However, the ratings in the press masked a really sinister environment that had a lot around institutional power dynamics that fostered abuse and the neglect of my mother and many other residents around her. One bright spot during this time, and one of the only things that kept her going, was her pursuit of painting. She always loved art, and she enjoyed visiting the Museum of Fine Art and the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And during this time, she actually painted several watercolors while she was at the Boston home. So I was going to share some of her art with you here. So her favorite one is this one of lilacs, which we have here in the apartment. And she just, you know, everyone who knows her knows she just loves flowers, and she was just really excited about how well this one came out. Another one that she painted as a greeting card that Anne Lederer found is this watercolor here, which is really beautiful. And then my favorite, and something that she gifted to me on a holiday or birthday or Christmas, was this one, which I personally love contemporary art and modern art a little more than like classical art. And so I just super love this one. I hang it next to my desk and it gets me out of a lot of like tough jams. This one right here. But yeah, really love that. So, you know, during that time, you know, many of my mother's close friends and family know that she struggled with depression, and she endured multiple hospitalizations over her life over multiple decades for suicide attempts or suicide plans. But again, in 2010, while she was living at the Boston home, my mother made another suicide attempt that landed her in the hospital again. And I was 7 months pregnant with my first child, Malcolm, and she left a suicide note to me, which I kept and found after I was going through all her papers just now. And in her note, she wrote about her desire for freedom. And she and I didn't really have any ideas to bring to the table either, as 2 people who are known for thinking of like tons of ideas. But she imagined the only way she could gain her freedom was through death. And so this is an excerpt of her letter to me at that time. She says, "I'm thinking of all the happiness you've given me, all the fun we had when you were little, all the giggles and hugs and kisses. I know my death will be sad for you, but we all die and I'm so ready to be free. I've tried so hard to make this work, but I hate every minute I spend here. Everyone is suffering so much and they're treated like shit for the most part. And I'm just so tired of it all. I'm so out of here. I know you'll do fine and you'll know that I'm finally free and at peace." And around this time, I had a recording of her right before she went to the hospital when we went to the Decortiva Sculpture Gardens. So I'm gonna play that for you. So after her suicide attempt, when she was in the hospital, a social worker suggested that since my mother had experienced so much trauma in her life, that she might benefit from trauma-specific counseling. And my mother had had a series of therapists and psychiatrists for over 30 years, and she freely shared this fact with people she met in hopes of destigmatizing mental health care. She so appreciated the help she'd gotten around mental health that even my middle name, Whitney, is after one of her early psychiatrists, which is Dr. Whittington. So not everyone has that honor. However, no one in over 30 years of therapy mentioned the idea of trauma-specific techniques. So upon discharge, my mother was sent to the next nursing home with an open bed, which is a place called Kirkwood House. And the Boston home wouldn't allow her to return because this was actually the second suicide attempt and hospitalization she'd had while she was there. So I told my mother at the time that it would be very difficult for me to continue to have a relationship if we didn't seek some kind of counseling together. And so she said she was willing. In the first 6 months after Malcolm had been born, I reached out to over 50 therapists in the Boston area to find anyone who had trauma-specific training, would accept my insurance, but also whose office was wheelchair accessible. And literally maybe 90% of places like aren't accessible to wheelchairs because they're in like old homes, old buildings, and other things out here. So we started at the time working with a psychologist called Dr. Sandy Dixon back in 2011. And really that was the beginning of everything changing. So Dr. Dixon used techniques called internal family systems, which is a technique that focuses on identifying and integrating different parts of yourself. And my mother started healing from a lot of past traumas. When she had been living in the Boston home, she'd been experiencing debilitating chronic pain in her back and her shoulders, and she was taking all these narcotic medications for it. But suddenly she was able to wean off all those medications, and she was relatively pain-free in her body. I would visit her Kirkwood House with Malcolm, and we enjoyed going to playgrounds and going out to cafes. And this, I think, was one of her real first profound experiences of freedom. So having a new measure of freedom from all the trauma that had been haunting her, in her life for so long. So over the last decade, we were supported ultimately by 4 different miraculous therapists and social workers with internal family systems and other types of trauma training. And 2 are here today who are going to share some words with us. So I'm delighted to first recognize Betty Wagner to share something. Are you around right now, Betty?
It is such a privilege to be here, and as everyone has said, what an inspiration it is just to meet Anne. We do have, when the office was open, now the practice that I'm in is all telehealth. We were wheelchair accessible, and I am grateful for that, that I had the chance to meet Anne. And I met with Anne and Elizabeth together, who had the wisdom to come together to be able to work through what can be the difficult conversations that people need. So one of the things I think about when I think of Anne is the Serenity Prayer. So glad to hear the prayer of St. Francis, and with the Serenity Prayer, we're asked to accept the things we cannot change, have the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And upon meeting Anne right away, it's just a visual experience of what level of acceptance she had to have without even knowing all of her story. I know so many people walk through the door of the counseling, and myself included, feeling out of control, not recognizing how much control we have over so many things that Anne couldn't control. But to meet her and to meet her warmth and personality and desire for connection and love, and to extend herself, and now to find out so much more about her life, it's truly a privilege. And the wisdom and the courage it takes for people to want to be able to, it's called the courageous conversation in couples work. I'm an IFS therapist also, but in couples work, which is really any 2 people, it's the goal is to create an atmosphere in which people feel safe to say what they really feel, what they really think, and have the courage to do that with each other so that they can connect around that. Elizabeth and Anne did not come in with high conflict. They came in and they were as lovely together as you see from Elizabeth and that you know of Anne. Just trying to be able to really find out how to hear from the other what they truly think and how they truly feel. And Anne was always a mom, always concerned about whether Elizabeth was okay. And just amazing to watch her just be in the world, given all of her challenges. And I was really as surprised as anyone to find out that she'd passed. And I honestly consider it one of my biggest privileges to have worked with her and with Elizabeth. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And then another person who worked most recently with my mom is Allison Biggs. So I'd like to recognize Allison to share some words.
I was saying this may be too long. I really wasn't sure, what to share or whether to share, being mindful of privacy, but Elizabeth encouraged me to. And, what I most want to share about Anne is my own sense of her spirit and her connection to the people in her life. And I was in a position, having met with her weekly for almost 7 years, to really hear and know a lot about what others have meant to her. So I think she would welcome my sharing that. So I'm just going to kind of read what I wrote. Anne truly was a bright light, and it was my honor to know and support her, and I will miss her. When I think of Anne, the first word that comes to mind is loving. Anne loved deeply, her family foremost and fiercely. She felt that bringing Elizabeth into the world was the best thing she ever did. And she was so proud of you, Elizabeth, and so honored to be your mom. She loved you fully inside and out, loved the child you were, the woman you became, and loved being the mother and grandmother you gave her the chance to be. She was thankful for the ways you advocated with her for medical and equipment needs. And she admired your fun-loving spirit and passion and confidence, and your many personal and professional accomplishments. She also loved just being silly and laughing together. And she even loved growing with you through conflict. You were her shining light. And Anne loved Caleb, her son-in-law. She was so grateful for the ways that he noticed her needs and helped with things large and small. I'm sure the list is endless, but I remember details like, when he adapted the height of her desk so she could use it after she moved, and making her wheelchair footrest work. They were maybe small things in a sense, but they were hugely important to her. And Caleb's delicious food, made with Anne's particular preferences and needs in mind at family gatherings, was so appreciated. Caleb, your creativity, warmth, and generosity were so dear to her. Malcolm and Claire, Anne's grandchildren. She adored you, who you are and who you are becoming. Her individual Malcolm Day and Claire Day were absolute highlights of her week, where they ate snacks, played games, did crafts, watched TV, and just spent time together in her apartment. I had the sense that alone time with Nana was just as special to Malcolm and Claire, and I hope they will always know what a gift they were to her and how much she loved them. Her little chickens, I believe she called them. I know Anne looked forward to her weekly calls with her brother, Larry. thankful that they could still talk and see each other online despite the great physical distance. I think she was a big sister to the end, worrying about you, Larry, and always wanting the best for you. She valued her friends near and far and remembered such meaningful times both in Colorado and here in Massachusetts. I think Anne might have been one of the last dedicated card senders that I know, remembering holidays and birthdays and trying till the end to address envelopes in her own handwriting, shaky though it was, to make it personal. In her heart, Anne broadened her family circle to include her caregivers. Her PCAs were her hands and feet, allowing her to live independently. She got to know them as friends, and she worried when she felt they were working too hard or juggling too much in their lives. She never lost sight of how much they did for her and meant to her, feeling such deep appreciation and love for them. Anne's community at BCIL was immensely important to her. She valued her colleagues there, and she really regretted that her growing fatigue and weakness made her unable to be as involved as she used to be and as she wanted to be. But she never stopped giving what she had to give. It was her mission to help others enjoy the independent life that meant so much to her. Surely Anne did experience a great deal of trauma in her life, deep wounding that we explored at length. But in talking about family wounding, she rarely spoke of someone she didn't feel loved by without adding, "But I loved them so." And then after a pause, "And I still love them." Her capacity for love, for forgiveness, and perspective was huge. And her inner light was never harmed, despite extensive trauma and physical hardship and pain that many of us can't imagine. As we worked together, Anne's connection with her inner light was able to heal many of the parts of her that had been hurt so deeply. That light held her courage, humor, curiosity, patience, kindness, and wisdom. Most of all, it held her love. I know her light has touched each of us and will remain within us. She would want every one of us to feel her enduring love. I think we can most honor Anne now by sharing our own light with others as generously and fully as she did. And we can remember not only her loving connection with us, but her grace and her love of music, books, art, nature, flowers, fireflies, birds, a beautiful sunset, the coming of spring each year, and of life itself. So in closing, here's a short verse I found that I feel captures Anne's wishes for us all. It's called "Turn Again to Life" by Mary Lee Hall. If I should die and leave you here a while, be not like others sore undone, who keep long vigils by the silent dust and weep. For my sake, turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something to comfort weaker hearts than thine. Complete these dear unfinished tasks of mine, and I, perchance, may therein comfort you.
Betty and Allison, thank you so much. That was beautiful. So you can see, how lucky we were to have these amazing people come into our life, and, what a change it was for her. The second big change was really for her to achieve freedom in the community. After 1 year at Kirkwood House, it was closed due to nursing home code violations. My mother was the last person to be shipped off because it was so hard to find a place that would take her. She ended up ultimately at Golden Living Center in Chetwynd due to their fear of liability from her past suicide attempts, and their primary focus on the elderly and dementia populations wouldn't allow her to leave the building on her own. So my mother's friend Ellie Hildebrandt connected my mother with the Boston Center for Independent Living, and they helped her negotiate a freedom contract with the Golden Living Center so she could leave to take a walk or join a friend at a museum or anything else that she imagined.
Ellie has provided a statement I will read. I will greatly miss my dear friend Anne. I learned so much from her. Her courage, tenacity, humor, and generosity will always be with me.
Ellie was also that bird whispering in her ear, like maybe you can do even more than just being able to leave the nursing home from time to time. Maybe you could just completely leave it. At the time, I was really the only family member who was in a position to support her living independently, but I had a young child and I knew that like the emotional bandwidth, the time bandwidth, like there was no way that I could just substantially support her doing that. But the amazing thing is that Boston Center for Independent Living, known as BCIL, knew of all sorts of programs to support people with disabilities living in the community. And so they helped my mother qualify for and find affordable housing. They set her up with the Mass Health Personal Care Attendant, or PCA program, that enables people to hire and pay helpers in their own homes that can be directed to do things the way they want to do them. And
on May 26, 2012,
she moved into her own apartment in Quincy near the Wollaston MBTA subway station on the Red Line. It was a major scramble for her to quickly find an apartment and then also hire personal care attendants who would start helping her for the first day. Ultimately, 2 of the nursing assistants at Golden Living Center became some of her first PCAs and really helped make it all possible. Rose Bristow and Maritza Paul were with her for a really long time. They were starting with her on day 1. They would fill in extra shifts while she was trying to find other people to add to the roster. And that was on top of their full-time primary jobs already at the nursing home. And Rose ultimately stayed with her throughout the entire time in Quincy, 2012 to 2018, if I remember correctly. And then once my mom was moving down here to Hanover and again having to figure out how to hire aides that could just land with her when she got here, Rose promised to commute like 45 minutes south every day and stay with her for another 6 months until she got established down here. So these are just some of the amazing people that she had the privilege to connect with through the PCA program, people who are just happy to somehow happy to be involved and to give themselves and to, you know, make someone's life so so much better. During this time, it was really cool when she went to Quincy because she also became active in advocating, you know, continuing really her advocacy for disability rights, but doing it in Massachusetts. And so right now I'm going to introduce Bill Henning. So he's one of director at the Boston Center for Independent Living, and he'll share a bit some of his words about her time and becoming a disability activist.
Thank you, Elizabeth. This has just been a remarkable evening. It's like so powerful. I know Anne so well from her disability rights world, but I didn't know so much of the foundational really oppression she faced in other ways that you so expertly really categorized it. It's distressing, but it's also uplifting to hear how she ascended, and certainly she ascended at BCIL. I don't know why her story stood out, maybe because she was so warm. I mean, she stood out right away. I didn't know who she was, but her advocate, a woman, I believe it was named Sarah Kaplan was pretty intense, started talking about her. And to me, as director, we have a lot of staff. We work with a lot of people with disabilities of any age in Greater Boston. And I remember that freedom contract now, and I'm pretty sure I looked at it, helped maybe write it, but I hadn't thought of that at all. And that, and that was a great creative idea by Sarah, but it certainly had a willing recipient. And I do remember the first time I met Anne. We were having an annual meeting. We'd hold them in a big meeting room at the MBTA office in Park Square in Boston. And we always did it a week before Thanksgiving. It was the Thursday or Wednesday, not the day before, the week before Thanksgiving seemed to work for us. And it's kind of dark. It's the heart of autumn. And here's this woman, and she's there, and she's in a nursing home. She was still in that horrible place, and they're all horrible. I heard you saying this is supposed to be a good one and a bad one. They all constrain freedom, and she felt that they constrain independence. And I can still kind of vaguely remember meeting her because, wow, and we almost felt a little responsible. We had, they're trying to confine her, which seems so disgusting, repulsive to us. And she took the ride in or something like that, was there for a meeting. And I can vaguely even remember, she okay? We're going to get her home okay on the ride. And she was indomitable even at that point. And I think it imprinted. And sure enough, she got out. And interestingly, it was, the date you said, her last public comments, I believe, on disability rights came 11 years later, because the last time she spoke publicly was at a public meeting on, I think it was June 27th or June 28th or something like that. We put it in our little tribute that we distributed, where she spoke out for adequate wages for PCAs. And when she did, she referenced the 7 years in the nursing home. And she really was BCIL's, but really more so the disability rights movement in Massachusetts' secret weapon on conveying independent living, independence, human dignity. She was all about human dignity. Of course, she had this tremendously warm persona, but everyone's speaking to that and they know that, but she was fierce too. She was fierce when she said that. And I don't think she ever, her words were fierce if her demeanor was peaceful. And it was a powerful, powerful combination. She was so fierce in mission, but gentle in manner and so strong in her statements. She was just remarkable. And lots of people connected with her, and I'm going to be followed by Shai and Allegra, two of the organizers, and I know they had very strong personal connections, but Anne was just a gem, and we will miss her. She's irreplaceable in how she conveyed things, stigmas that keep other people down, no longer kept her down. She spoke freely about the mental health challenges, the depression, the suicides. That's so important for others facing those things to hear. We don't know, we simply just don't know who she helped in all these statements, but I'm sure it's many hundreds of people along with just advancing the cause. And she actually sat on the state's PCA Workforce Council, appointed by then auditor Suzanne Bump, and served quite honorably and effectively for many, many years. So thanks for the opportunity to speak today. We appreciate anyone who's donated in Anne's honor. It will help us to carry on our work, but her memory, her spirit will be with us, and that's what will really enable us to carry on everything she stood for, everything she did. Just remarkable, and I thanks.
Bill, thanks so much. During her time as an advocate, she was also appointed to the Massachusetts Personal Care Attendant Workforce Council, and Jack Boson was a director at the time and offered some words for me to read today. He says, I'm very sorry that I could not personally attend the celebration of Anne's remarkable life. For 8 years, I served as the executive director of the Personal Care Attendant Workforce Council. The council consisted of members appointed by various state agencies and was charged with strengthening both the recruitment and retention of personal care attendants, PCAs. A PCA provides a person with a disability with the personal services and assistance needed to live with independence and dignity. Anne was appointed to the council in 2013. I met with her shortly after her appointment to provide an orientation to the work of the council. Anne, as is true with all great advocates, based her advocacy on her own personal story. As I learned the details of Anne's journey from institutional confinement to a life of dignity and independence, I was repeatedly impressed by the grace, simple eloquence, and lack of rancor with which Anne told her story. Anne worked diligently to improve working conditions for PCAs so that their numbers would increase and more persons with disabilities would have access to the independence that Anne treasured so highly. It was an honor and a pleasure to know and work with Anne Johansen.
Colin Killick, the executive director of the Disability Policy Consortium, is another person who worked with my mother. He has provided a tribute I will read. I knew Anne professionally. She was such an amazing human being and powerful advocate. She really showed that someone can both be profoundly kind and profoundly strong. And she was so generous with her story. The work that she did through the Housing Advocacy Leadership Team that Allegra and I started is directly responsible for hundreds of people with disabilities having housing today, and I'm so grateful to her for that.
So two of the additional people she worked closely with in these early days would also like to share something. And so first I'm going to turn it over to Allegra Heaths.
Thank you. Yeah, as Bill mentioned, I was an organizer at the Boston Center for Independent Living, and I moved to Massachusetts and started at BCIL in summer 2012, just as Anne was also moving out of the nursing home into her own apartment. And so we met that summer, and we're on that journey together of getting involved in the Massachusetts disability community. Well, she had already started, but and I remember that at first Anne was really reluctant to even go talk to legislators at the State House. Because her life hadn't taught her to expect that anyone would listen to her, going through all the hardships that we've been hearing about. But then within just a few years, she was serving on the statewide PCA Workforce Council and many other forms of leadership. And of course, it was her deep dedication to just doing whatever it took for the disability community that drove that evolution. And one memory that stands out to me is one time Anne was scheduled to speak at the State House at a briefing for legislators about the alternative housing voucher program. She was going to share her own story of what it took for her to find housing and what that had meant for her in her life. And so I called her the night before to check in, and she said, yep, I'll see you in the morning, all set. My morning PCA can't come, so no problem. I'm just going to have my evening PCA dress me in my clothes for the event, and I'll sleep in my wheelchair. And I was like, Anne, I can't ask you to do that. That's too much. And she said, no, that's what I want to do. I need to be there. And that was Anne. She was always really clear on the stakes of our work, and she knew that each of our efforts mattered, and she was always willing to do what it took to make change for her and for the whole disability community. And I just miss her so much, and I'm so glad to be here with you all.
Thanks, Allegra. And now I'd love to invite Shia French to share something.
Thank you, and thank you for pulling this all together. I feel so appreciative of having a kind of virtual option and for people from all different places to come. I organized the BCIL for 6.5 years from 2016 until a couple months ago, and I think Anne was on the top of my list for people to meet with, and made a big impression on what our work meant, and also she definitely taught me from the beginning lots of things to think about and keep track of, and also always have this very clear sense of how all of the different kinds of oppressions people faced are intertwined, that there's never any moment of like, what I experienced is more important than someone else. She was always very clear for herself and for everyone else we were working with on, that personal care attendant and worker justice is just as important and just as key and integral, or that racism is just as integral to achieving disability rights as any other part of this struggle. And yeah, that she was a force, so that we often had meetings where the alternative housing voucher program is what Allegra mentioned was something that she devoted a lot of time to, and also something that I worked on a lot, in that we would have these conversations at least once a year about how much more funding should we ask for, how many more vouchers should we get that year. And Anne was always, I think as organizers, you're always like, okay, so we got maybe 50 or 100 vouchers the previous year. Like, that's probably about what the legislature is willing to do this year. And Anne was one of the voices always saying, like, no, we need to ask for 200, we need to ask for 250. Like, this is not enough. There are people who need freedom. And she would back it up, that she would be at the State House, she'd be meeting with dozens and dozens of legislators. She, I think, one of the strongest relationships with her state senator, who is now the I think vice chair of the Housing Committee in the Senate, which is incredibly helpful for this program. And she also was very involved in the Wollaston tea stop near her house in Quincy. Was one of the red line stops that wasn't accessible and didn't have an elevator, and she spoke up about it again and again at different meetings, and was a huge part in that station being prioritized and that being made accessible. And I think she also really served as a role model, that there were a lot of people in the position of just starting their advocacy work. And here Anne was someone who clearly has a disability, clearly has lived through shit, who didn't always feel confident about this, who is like speaking up so strongly. Yeah, so I really loved working with Anne and being Anne's friend. I loved her organizing skills and also what a great friend she could be. She and I have a similar disability, and we connect over that sometimes, and those moments were beautiful too. And I will miss her deeply, and she will always be a voice in my ear to always push for more justice than seems readily possible.
Oh, Shia, thanks so much. As Shia alluded to, one of the big surprises when she chose to move into her apartment near Quincy was that it wasn't until she moved in that she found out that the Red Line station, which was literally a 5-minute roll away, was the only not wheelchair accessible station on the entire Red Line. And in fact, even at the time, it was so mind-boggling to everyone else that if you bought a map of the subway, it usually had a little wheelchair next to that station, because it, like, people just couldn't hold it in their mind that there was still this Red Line station, or really any station, that was not accessible. So she realized, like, wow, I thought I was moving close to, so I could, get around places. Now I'm going to have to truck it over streets and broken sidewalks and broken roads to get up to North Quincy Station or one of the other stations to get different places. And so she just kept doing that. But one of her lasting legacies was to spearhead the accessibility aspects of reconstructing that station. And in that, she worked closely with that Senator John Keenan on that effort, as well as so many other people. And in a lovely gesture, he's provided a video statement that we're going to share here today.
Hi, I'm State Senator John Keenan. I just want to offer my condolences to Anne's family and friends. Anne was truly a remarkable person. She did so much for those who had been in nursing homes like herself and had difficulty getting out. She worked so hard for those with disabilities, and then worked so hard as well to make the Wollaston train station accessible for all. Anne would come to our office after a long trip down Hancock Street in her wheelchair in any kind of weather. When she arrived here, she'd arrive with a smile on her face and a twinkle in her eye, and with a real sense of commitment to those that she was looking to help. Her dedication was remarkable, and she's truly going to be missed. So again, my condolences to Anne's family and friends, and thank you for the gift that was Anne.
So this is the last part, saving the best years for last. So starting, with her trauma-informed therapy in 2011 was really the beginning of the best decade of her life. As she moved from Quincy to Hanover near us, she continued to make new friends. My mother also had a series of amazing and supportive PCAs who made this independent living possible. She ultimately became friends with many of her PCAs, and they'd share meals together and play Scrabble and have adventures in her MV1 wheelchair van, the Blueberry. So I wanted to invite Terry Lawrence to share some remarks right now. Terry, are you there?
Oh, hi, I am.
Awesome, we can hear you.
Oh my goodness, I'm nervous. I'm not a good speaker, but I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed working with Anne. I remember when I first called her and she was like, "Oh, the position's filled." I felt so disappointed because I felt like that's where I should have been. She's like, "Can I just save your number and give you a call back?" And like a week later, she called me and I went in for an interview and we just kind of clicked from day one. So I just want to say she's was definitely a welcoming person, warm, inspirational, definitely encouraging. She definitely loved you, Caleb, Malcolm, Claire, and her brother. You guys meant the world to her. And I know you guys are gonna have your days. She helped me get through my time with my dad passing, and I appreciated just her being there because it was definitely uplifting. And I just want to say I wish you guys well, and I'll definitely keep you all in my prayer. And thank you for sharing your mom with me.
Oh, thanks, Terry. And now I want to recognize another one of her most recent PCAs who had been with her since the beginning through the Hanover era, Isabel Andrade.
Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. Well, I started working with Anne in 2018, just when she had moved in. And Anne is, I don't even know, it's just like, she was the best. Every time I go, I worked on the weekends, and once I go there, it wasn't even like work. I enjoyed going there. So as soon as I get there, it's smiles, we talk, and most of the stories I've heard, she told me all of them. And it's just like, my heart is just still broken. When Elizabeth told me that she passed, I just couldn't believe it. I'm still very sad. And I don't even know how I'm going to get through this, but I will. And I'm going to miss her so much. But thank you, Elizabeth, for having, me and you guys as family. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, Isabel, thank you so much. And thank you, Isabel and Terry, for everything that you did for my mom, making it possible for her to live independently. It was just like amazing. Living the dream. It was amazing. So since 2010, my mother has also enjoyed playing with her grandchildren and being a grandmother. Malcolm Bruce was born in 2010 and Claire Ann was born in 2013. And, she moved in 2018 to an apartment 1 mile away from us here in Hanover Every week she would host each grandchild for an afternoon in the apartment with hot chocolate and cookies and fruit cups and crafts and favorite cartoons. And I wanted to find a way to enable them to contribute. So I decided to interview both of them in or amongst the things in her old living room. And I had mixed success, but they warmed up over time. And so I'm going to share this video from them.
Who are you?
Xavier Glutenheimer III.
Is there anything you would like to say to Nana?
No.
Why?
No.
Me am Malcolm Esterbrook Johansen.
And what is your favorite piece of Nana equipment and why?
Probably the Hoya lift thing, because I can play on it without destroying too many things other than the wall.
Doing? So Claire, what is your favorite piece of Nana equipment and why?
The Hoya lift.
Boing! Yeah, sailing right away. What's faster, you or Nana?
Nana. Well, there was this one time that me and Nana went outside and we decided to have a race. Except she'd actually just gotten a new higher speed setting on her wheelchair. So actually when we started racing, she went so fast she defied gravity and just went right off the planet into space. But she orbited around the sun and then came back to Earth like an asteroid and right on top of her apartment building, destroying the entire thing and creating a massive crater all around it.
So sometimes we went for a nice walk with Nana.
No.
Which I know is like one of your favorite activities.
No.
But did you always walk? What was your preferred mode of transportation?
Sitting and waiting for someone to carry me.
I see. Wheelchair jousting. What was the favorite show that you ever watched with Nana, and do you think she enjoyed it?
Probably Psych, because it was funny, and I think she enjoyed it.
And what is Nana's favorite animal?
I think it might be a chicken.
And where did you get that shirt from?
Well, Nana.
I see. And is there any other shirt that you'll wear on any day of the entire year?
No.
And what does the shirt say on the bottom?
Mathema chicken.
And that makes you...
I already said it. I'm going to say it again.
The Mathema chicken. And what's one of your favorite memories of Nana, or something you'll remember most about Nana?
Probably the smell of her apartment.
Yeah, what did it smell like?
I don't know, Nana? What else am I supposed to say? That's like the only time I've ever encountered that smell. That's why it's so memorable. Because I don't really forget smells.
Yeah.
It smells like Nana.
So, getting towards the end here, as you can tell, she totally also loved my partner, Caleb Estabrooks, who helped her with myriad handy person tasks and made fun of her at appropriate moments, and baked her birthday cakes and made a million lovely lunches and dinners and Christmas Eve roast beef and Yorkshire pudding dinners. He even helped us in 2021 to go on a beach vacation on the Cape for 3 days with Caleb, the kids, and my mom. And we stayed at a cottage right on the beach and played in the sand and even did a day trip to Nantucket. So I'm gonna give it to Caleb to share a few words.
Yeah, trying to avoid the feedback. I'm sitting next to Elizabeth. Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth's husband. Met Anne in 2004 on the first trip to Colorado that I went to with Elizabeth to meet her friends and family. And I'd been told before, I'd heard, it was kind of took to heart that when you marry someone, you marry their family. It's a big part of it. And after meeting Anne, I admire strong women. It's something that's been part of me, and I could see that in Elizabeth. And after meeting her mom, I could see this is where it comes from. This is something that's very much part of her. It's something I want to be part of. So yeah, after meeting her, the decision to marry Elizabeth, that was only 50% mine, was obvious to me. In 2005, like Elizabeth said, we had a busy year. We had to move Anne from Denver to Cambridge, Mass, which was a huge undertaking, mostly for Elizabeth. I was a supporter, but it was huge. And that's when, Anne really started to become such a huge part of my life and make indelible marks on me that will be part of me for the rest of my life. One of the wonderful things about that, it was really difficult. She moved into a nursing home, but she moved out here in 2005. We were married in 2006. And because of the help of wonderful people, she was able to come to our wedding and be part of it, which is something I'll always be very thankful for. I was with Anne, I was around her for some of the most challenging parts of her life, like we've talked about quite a bit, living in nursing homes, seeing her at the darkest times that I was ever aware. I'm sure I know she's had a lot of challenges throughout her life, but these are really challenging times. I understand the basic feeling of depression. For me, it's something that and sad because it's just a kind of a lack of perspective, maybe something about you that needs to be that can be fixed with help. But Anne was just in such a hard, amazingly difficult situation in this part of her life, and the fact that she pulled through it and persevered and fought, and in such a difficult position to do so, is no short of a great inspiration to what's possible for anybody. And on the flip side, setting too high standards for people can be a dangerous ideal. But seeing what a person can do when they apply what they're capable of in a really challenging situation was amazing. But then I also got to see her in some times of great joy when she moved from the nursing home into an apartment for independent living. I can joke that it was she was amazingly happy, like a type of joy that I would associate with probably way too much of some sort of substance abuse or something at the time. She was just incredibly happy, and just raw, pure happiness and joy to come from something to such a great position, to live on her own, to be independent again, and with help of people living, better than she had in many years. Our time with Anne was too short. I'll always be incredibly thankful for where she was able to join us in our life. She was there for the birth of both of our children. They got to have her as a huge part of their life. Where we live next to my parents, and then they had their Nana just down the street. So having all this family around my children is what I've always wanted. And having Anne being willing to move out here in Hanover to be part of that was an enormous gift to me and to our children. And they'll always know it. They'll always remember her, and they'll always appreciate that. She's got to spend more time with her grandchildren than a lot of people did. And those are based on the choices that she made. She didn't, retire to Florida like a lot of people might choose to. She moved to a place that was probably even more challenging for her to be near family. And we saw it with our kids. Elizabeth said they each had a day of every week with Nana. And if you tried to schedule something on their Nana day, we learned we had to say, so Malcolm was normally there on Thursdays. If there was a concert for his band scheduled for a Thursday, I learned early I had to say, Malcolm, this week, not like you have a band concert on a Thursday. That would, I know I'd be faced with that. Say, Malcolm, we got to move your Nana day to Wednesday this week because there's a band concert on Thursday. If I did it the other way around, I would have I would have seen the outrage before I got the words out of my mouth. Like, don't worry, you're still having Nana Day. It's on Wednesday. You didn't want to mess with that. It was a huge part of their life, just to be with Nana, watch TV, eat junk food, be spoiled, and be loved unconditionally, no matter what else was going on in their day. I'm just so thankful that they got that at this impressionable part of their life. It will forever be missed. I have a feeling our children would want their Nana Day well through their 20s if they could have it. But I will never truly feel her being totally absent from my life. I have Elizabeth, who's very much her mother. I have my kids who are deeply ingrained with her snarky wit, and with every bit of creative brilliance I see in them and unrelenting love, I see a big part of Anne, and that will be there forever for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll switch the music. Okay. Oh man. So just a couple more things that I wanted to share. I mentioned at the beginning that my mother's all-time favorite movie was The Big Lebowski, and she had an amazing sense of humor, and she loved the go with the flow attitude of the dude. And so according to her wishes, her body was cremated, and we're going to spread the ashes in various places that she loved in Massachusetts and in Colorado, but we're going to do it just as they did in her favorite movie. So just so you can be a little part of that, I'm going to share the scene where the characters, Walter Sobchak and the dude, spread the ashes of their dear bowling buddy, Donnie. And it'll give you a feel for what we're going to do.
We commit your final mortal remains to the bosom of the Pacific Ocean, which you love so well. Good night, sweet prince. Oh shit, dude, I'm sorry.
Okay, so now we're going to do the final slideshow. So to close out everything, I have a slideshow of photos from throughout her life, and they're set to two of her favorite songs. The first song is a song we would listen to every Christmas called It's in Every One of Us by David Pomerantz. It's sung by John Denver and the Muppets on a Christmas album. And the song reflects the most important thing I think I learned from my mother, the idea that it's in every one of us to be wise. What I learned from her is that all people are really born with an essential core part of themselves that they can access to heal themselves and connect with the world, no matter what has happened. Without many other examples to draw from around her, she felt like in her core that the way she was parented was wrong. So with books and with other resources, she taught herself to be a wonderful parent to me, who was a sensitive child. And she felt in her core that she was treated poorly in nursing homes, and she found a way to be independent again and to speak out against those abuses and help improve the situation for others. She experienced so many losses, and she had a degenerative disease, but the last decade of her life was the best one. The second song in the slideshow is a groovy tune that reflects the happiness my mother achieved in her last decade. We always enjoyed 50s, 60s, and 70s music together on the radio since I was growing up, and this song was a particular favorite of hers. She and I often danced in the car to this tune. It celebrates the wonderful atmosphere of a public park on a Saturday on the 4th of July. Anyone and everyone is welcome. Nana spent many lovely days in parks with her grandkids over the last decade. One of the verses of the song says, "I've been waiting such a long time for Saturday." I like to think of this last decade of her life as her Saturday, 4th of July. The song is Saturday in the Park by Chicago.
things we can all know everything without ever knowing why. It's in every one of us by and by.
I love you.